Welcome to the Black on Black Education podcast, where we interview the most brilliant minds
and connected hearts to discuss our shared passion for the transformation,
the revolution,
reimagining,
and recreation
of education in the Black community.
My name is Eva Loren Jean Charles, founder of Black on Black Education and New York City high school teacher.
And I'm Jamal Thomas, her partner and dad, education enthusiast.
And we're your hosts. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.
And most importantly, to enjoy the episode.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Black on Black Education podcast. This is going to be a special one for me, but I am very excited. So let's get this thing kicked off. Who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Y'all get right in. So my name is Adrienne Waller. I also go by the Worldwide Educator. And so when I think about what I do, I say it all centers around amplifying the work of others. So that's kind of what I do. Like I help you showcase, you develop, you grow in whatever way possible. So that's what I do in my 9 to 5. So as an assistant principal, amplifying students, amplifying teachers, their voice, their power, everything that makes them great. And then in the, side hustle, what I do is allowing educators to see all that they're great about and amplify that through their resume, through their interview, as they're preparing for annual reviews. And that's not just educators. I've worked with people in various industries, but it's all about what is it that you do, what makes you awesome, and how can we make you awesomer?
I mean, Adrienne is being modest, and it was special to her, special to me too. I mean, me and Adrienne have spent, a bunch of time together, like during that 3-month of Clubhouse wave, we was on so many stages together, and I this conversation where we just get to talk to her is something that's been important. So, you fancy yourself the Worldwide Educator, and that's a different kind of title. Dive into that a little bit. Tell people about what it means to not just be centered here in the United States, but to have a focus on the world as it pertains to education.
So global education is just an incredible thing, right? So I essentially was kind of tired of the U.S. I actually had gotten to a point in my education career where I thought education wasn't for me. I thought that this, maybe I wasn't really suited to be an educator. Maybe this wasn't the right field for me. And I was at a point where I was like, look, if I go out the country and it's still not working, maybe I need to rethink what I think is my career. Yeah. And that was at year 9. At year 9, I was like, yeah, let's do it. I heard some people talking about it. I was like, maybe this is what I need to do. And I went abroad on a 3-year contract, but I was like, look, if I can make it a year, that's great. If not, I'll be on the next plane to get back home. And that was in 2016. Here I am in 2022, still doing it and not knowing when I'm coming back. And it's been incredible. I've been in multiple countries. I mean, it's had its ups and its downs. COVID definitely was a rough patch for me in terms of I actually was employed in China when all of this Corona, COVID all kind of popped off, visiting my cousin in Australia, looking at the news like, what's going on? Thinking it was SARS 2.0, and it just really ended my life. But it's still been so incredible, the journey and everything that I've learned about the great things that U.S. education does well, because there are a few things that we do really, really well in comparison to the rest of the world, special education being one of them. And so that's one that actually I think the U.S., and mind you, there's still many ways we can get better. But if you compare the systems, the laws, the supports that are there for students who are, neurodiverse, physically diverse, we're really ahead of the game in comparison to most countries. Now, there's a lot of stuff we don't do really well. Like school looks the same very much as it did a century ago or more, and so that's an area where you look at places like a Finland and, New Zealand, they're really kind of like, oh, wow, this is some innovative ways to do learning, places in Asia. And I feel like the US is really dragging in that area. But being abroad has helped me to kind of see just so many similarities that kids are kids. I don't care what country you go to. Kids are kids. It's the adults that are really different. They're like, well, what is it like teaching the kids? I'm like, the kids are for the most part the same, but it's the adults, the parents, the people you're working with, that's really where you're like, oh, now this is different. And so that's kind of some of the joys, highs and lows of international education.
No, I mean, I love that perspective. And I think that something that you brought up that I didn't consider was that special education piece, was the idea that there are ways that we can really think about the assets that the United States education system has. And we always have to come from that perspective. Sometimes us as educators, when we're steeped in it, it's very, very difficult to do that. But I think bringing that in that perspective is really great. And it's something for us to ponder about when we're having conversations across folks who work in the United States and folks who work outside of the United States. And so, like, well, why would you advocate for a teacher to make the decision to teach abroad? And I know you talked a little bit about it in your own personal experience, but what did you gain as an individual and as an educator by making this transition in your career?
So I typically will never just advocate to go abroad. For me, the big thing, and I've talked about this, is you having choice and agency over what's next for you. And so for me, it's about you knowing that you have more than just the US in front of you. There's so many other things and ways that you can engage, and that you have a choice, whether that's to stay in your school, to stay in your district, to stay in your state, or to stay in your country. Whatever that is, you have agency. Now, what are some of the benefits that I would say are about going abroad? For me, I mean, the biggest one that was like the biggest attraction for me was just a work-life balance. I don't take nearly as much home. Like, I literally can finish work and finish most of it at work, like the way jobs are kind of designed, and able to actually then freely kind of do other things I want to do. Frequently, I felt like my salary is much more competitive because I'm generally not paying for housing. Most of the countries I've lived in, housing is taken care of, and housing is by far one of your biggest expense. If your housing is taken care of, your ability to clear debt, use money, more disposably, to invest, to do all these different things, is amplified in a way. And so that was really big for me. In 3 years, I cleared $30,000 worth of debt while going to 20 countries.
You better come on.
How do you do that, without, in the US, I couldn't imagine that, and still be able to travel, right? Like, it wasn't like I was sitting still. Like I told you, I went to 20 countries in that time. 20 countries, $30,000 of debt, and had a work-life balance. I wasn't working 2 and 3 jobs. I wasn't, going crazy. Like, all of that was mainly just done off of my regular income. And I only did like tutoring here and there. Like, I was like, maybe. Yeah. So those are probably some of the big, and then the ability to travel. Like, I have breaks in a way that I didn't have breaks before. So like, I have a fall break. I have 3 weeks for Christmas break. I have a February break. I have a spring break, and that doesn't include long weekends and holidays that are in there. So just this ability to have more time to travel, either in an off season, to go to places that I never would have thought of. And then you're working with people who are from everywhere and have been everywhere. And so I learned so much about the world. Like, I have friends in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, like, who've lived all these different places. And then they visited all these places. So they're like, oh, well, have you ever been to Myanmar? I'm like, no, tell me about it. Like, there are countries I hadn't even heard of, if I'm honest, until I started doing this. People are talking about countries. They're like, oh, this country is beautiful and great. I never thought I would want to go to the Philippines. The Philippines is by far one of my favorite places I visited. And I wouldn't have done that if I had stayed, in the US and just traveled from the United States. And so, being like, when I was in Qatar, I was super close to Sri Lanka. Like, I could get to Sri Lanka in the same amount of time you can get to Cali. So like that's also something like very different, go to Europe and in a minute you're on a train and you can get from here to here to here. And that's just really different. Now, what I learned about myself and like how I've grown is I'm a much more patient person. And I thought I had patience, but I will tell you, to go to a different country, pack up your bags and live somewhere without family, you learn a whole new set of patience, because each country does things really differently. And so I've learned to be a lot more patient. I've learned to see myself. I've gone through a beauty journey for myself as well. So like, how I see myself, my Blackness, my Black hair, that's been a journey that I don't know if I would have gone on in the same way. Now, mind you, I stopped getting a perm in 98. So it wasn't like I wasn't in the natural game for a while. But being able to see my big curly hair or my bun or whatever it is that I present as me being beautiful was a journey that I took by being around other Black women who were out of like their normal space. So I think those are some of the ways that I feel like as a human, like I tell people I'm a better human for having left America, you know.
Wow.
There's so much there, and I'm positive Eva's going to want to go into the hair part and the Blackness part, you know what I mean, around the country. I want to think back to some of the beginning parts of what you said, because I have to imagine there's some people right now listening that are almost jealous, like, wait, you what, like you made what, and you don't have to do what, like that what people are thinking about that. And I think that that's a fantastic thing in both directions. Like, imagining people from Finland saying, wow, we're doing all of these innovative things here in Finland. You know what? I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move to the U.S. and I'm going to show them what it is that we're doing in Finland. And for you here in the U.S. saying, look, for neurodiverse populations and things like that, we're doing that better. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go and I'm going to show people around the world how we do it. It sounds to me like this is just something that more people probably need to reconsider, because that's something that would be better for the overall education. When we say system, it's like the world system, and then the country system, and then the state system, and then the local system. So there's so many different, quote unquote systems, and it's, you're getting perspective from a lot of different places. So I'm curious, out of all of those places that you've been, what are some of the like most important things that people here in the States probably need to know, where this is self-evident how much better it's happening in these other places, and we need to stop even arguing about it, because like, this is better, let's do it now. Like, what are some of those things?
The one that stands out to me the most is how we look at testing. And I feel like in the US, testing drives everything. And I feel like we're like testing crazed. And it's like test, all these evaluations. And you go out the country and you go, wait, y'all not testing all the time? Like, how do you, and there's a fine balance of it, right? There's a not testing enough to even know if you're doing anything effective, right? There's that in where it's like, well, maybe we should do a little bit more. And then there's the other one where it's like, you're testing so much. When are you actually engaging in community building? When are you actually engaging in getting to know your students? When are you actually teaching? You're spending all this time. And I feel like many international schools have gotten to a very sweet spot of that kind of balance of, we trust our educators. That's one big thing, is that there's a lot of educator trust and not so much oversight. If I'm going into classrooms, I'm going in to be a partner in learning, not to validate that you are doing it. Now, am I paying attention as a leader? Yeah. Like, if you off the walls, like, yes, we're going to have some follow-up conversation, but that's not why I'm in there. I'm in there for those babies, right? Just yesterday, I stumbled across a class and they're like, hey, can you come and join our scavenger hunt for our grade ones? Yeah. So I'm walking around the school. We're doing a scavenger hunt, supporting each other. And that's just what the learning was about, And then at the end, they asked the question, who are other people who are part of your learning experience? And they expected the kids to be able to say my name, that I am part of their learning experience. And I think that's really different. And when you move away from testing, you can engage in learning in that way. So that would be the first one. I also think that international schools do a really good job about, and I know this is really important to Black on Black, is moving towards more student agency. And so like having ways that they're actually having conversations about getting the students involved in their learning, taking charge. And it's one that I'm always pushing because it's super important to me, is how do you allow students to be agents of their learning, and whether that's through project-based learning, inquiry-based, like whatever you're doing, how are they starting to facilitate their learning? So I think those are probably the two that stand, or maybe that's even three, because it's like teacher agency, less testing, and then, that student advocacy part, I think is really some things that often, and mind you, just like the US, there's a range, right? All international schools are not created equal. So there's some that you look at and they're doing really, really great work. And then there's some where you're like, oh, child, like you don't get your paycheck on time. So like, I like to be honest with people that And as much as the US has its issues, you're not working somewhere in the US, you're not getting your paycheck, not in. So those are some differences that, as you're looking at schools, and something I help educators with is like, how do you know that this is going to be a reputable, good school that you're going to? Because you're uprooting your life. Because some of them are real raggedy. They opened the school 2 weeks ago and you coming out there on a visitor's visa. Yeah, no, that's not, that's not it. So I do want to be transparent and not be deceitful that all, like, if you go internationally, everything is going, you need to do some research. You need to have some understanding that there's a range of schools as well.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's just like anything else. And there's the good, there's the bad, there's the pros, there's the cons. And we're always going to have to grapple with those things. But it is also important for people to think about things that they might never have thought about before, particularly as it pertains to the ability to make change in a system that you might sometimes need to leave for a little while in order to create and make the change that you want to. Like, I know, working with Adrienne, how much impact she's had on educators, and you are not even in the same country as the educators that you're working with, right? And so through the Teacher Action Board, through Teaching for Black Lives, just some partnerships that we've done together, we really had I've had an ability to learn and grow and be pushed by you. And so I just wanted you began to start to dig into this, and you began to start talking about this in your story of like, I'm going to come into this space with this educator and support them in the way that they need, and not really be over them and trying to be super technical about the way that they're doing learning in their classroom. But I want to talk a little bit about like being a school leader, right? And educator development holistically, and how you as an educator's educator, right? Like, how do you make impact on the people that you're serving, on the teachers that you're serving, because of the experience that you've had both in the United States and outside of it?
So I think the first one is that I think every moment is a space for learning, right? For me and for them. So the first part is that I'm always learning from them, right? And so some of what I think is great is that as I go into classrooms, I'm learning from them, and I'm able to share that with somebody else who might need it, or point them to the person who, I got that learning from. So I think that's one that's really important. The other is being willing to be wrong, right? Like, I'm not always right. And so that's really important, is that like sometimes I've made mistakes, and being able to admit that mistake and then, become better for it is one. And then when I was saying like every moment is a time for learning, it's structuring meetings where I'm able to infuse in a meeting a bit of learning as well. So, whether it's thinking about like, oh, how we start the meeting is something that you can then use in your classroom. How you're getting your learning in is in a way, because I feel like so often teacher learning exemplifies everything we shouldn't be doing in learning and best practices. Like, so often it's like, oh, I'm going to teach you to be student-centered by not being student-centered with you.
Adrienne, when I tell you I recorded a video about this yesterday, oh my gosh, go ahead.
And I think that modeling as a leader what you want them to do, so that includes the agency. So why don't I need to micromanage? Because you don't need to micromanage your students. And if I'm micromanaging you, that's showing you that you need to micromanage your kids. Versus if I'm showing I trust you, you can do this. This is something you do well. And even things as small as a teacher coming to me and I go, well, what do you want to do? What do you think the answer is? Instead of just giving an answer. Like that, those are the same things you do with your kids. Like, well, how do you think you should solve this? What's a different way to get there? When kids come to my office for, behavior, it's like, well, how do you think we can solve this? Like, I don't have to tell you how to solve the problem. You probably have so much of that within you. I'm there to fill the gap when you can't, not to be the first solution. But I just feel like so much education is like terrible. And so like, trying to remind myself of that, right? Because it's very easy to just, a sit and get is easy to produce, right? It's very easy to include that. Actually taking the time to say, how can I engage my teachers in a way that doesn't feel childish either, right? Because that's the other end of it. You see people who make it like, I'm like, I will never tell my teacher to act like a child. Like, that's demeaning. So how do I develop an experience for you that gives you a challenge, gives you an experience that you can then replicate and, create for your first grader? I'm not going to treat you like a first grader. That's just ridiculous to me. So, and I feel like those are the two ends. Either it's so engaging, but you have to be a child, or it's completely not engaging, but I'm telling you how to be engaging. Yeah. How do you do that?
Right.
Absolutely. I'm so into everything that you just said there, because I just think that that is the manifestation. It's when particularly schools that do professional development in-house, which is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, but does all of their professional development in-house, like, this is how you wake up as a leader and say, like, this is what I'm expecting from my educators, right? So if you have your first 2 weeks or your first 3 weeks of professional development and you think that you're going to be able to plan it the day before, or not plan it at all, or not think about how the lessons are cohesive, those are all things that you're expecting for your educators to do, but then aren't doing it when so it's just showing the disconnect between school leaders and those who are a part of making sure that the educators have the learning that they need, because there's always learning, right? The art of teaching is that you're required to always have to learn something new, always think of a new perspective. And so, like, that piece right there really, really touched me, because I've been thinking a lot about the problem with school leaders no longer being in the classroom to some degree, or at least not thinking about how they're showing up and how they're developing their teachers by mimicking and mirroring what it is that they're expecting from their teachers. So that was such a great piece to get into, because I think that we needed to tick that off and have that be named. Like, we have to be able to recognize that if we're expecting something from our educators, that the development that we give them needs to be something that's planned effectively. So I appreciate it.
And just real quickly, she said something that sparked, it kind of goes back to a previous question that I completely forgot about. And you talked about ways we can learn from other countries. The UK has a model about leaders. You have to be basically like the superintendent to not actually be in classes, right? And so, like, your principals, your assistant principals still have at least one course load that they're teaching, and that keeps that connection. I think that's really important, and I look forward to having that again. In elementary school, it is a little bit harder. I've been trying to figure it out because I don't teach a specialty. So, like, how do I do that in a way where I could take, once a week, twice a week, a class? Because the reality is there are demands. You can't be teaching a full load. But the UK, it's very much their philosophy that just because you're a leader doesn't mean you've left the learning in the educating process. So I thought I would kind of name that as something that we could learn from another country. But I know Jamal was about to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to jump in, and I say this on the podcast a lot, and I don't think it can be said enough. So many of these things are not just strategy; they're spirit. Like, it's how you, like, who are you, and how do you feel about these young people, and what do you want for them? How do you feel about the people who you work with, and what do you want for them? Like, it changes how you operate when you're coming from a place where I absolutely positively want what is best for these young people. And everybody just does not do that. And I'm sure that's in the US. I'm sure that's, wherever you go. You talked about that willingness to be wrong. So teachers who walk in the classroom and I've told this story before. I'll tell it again. I had a teacher where I wish I could remember exactly what the topic was. But there was something that she spoke to in class, and I knew she was wrong. I had read it recently in an encyclopedia or something, and I brought the encyclopedia to school the next day. I was like, no, that's just not the day of. I was like, no, that's not right. And she just was, just wished me away. You know what I mean? Like, I was just the idiot. I brought the encyclopedia to school the next day to show, like, look, you know what I mean? You said this yesterday. The encyclopedia says this. And she was like, get out of my class. Get out. She kicked me out the class, and I didn't leave. And there's a whole nother story behind that. Longer version of the story, which, included, it wasn't physical and nothing like that. But, they had to bring the paraprofessionals and stuff because I wasn't leaving because I was right. And, and so I didn't go about it in the most respectful way. And something else that school should be teaching students is how to have this dynamic, in a respectful way. But the teachers should have had some method. I was a child. This is a grown person. They should have had the ability to say, you know what? I got that one wrong. Like it would have changed so much just for everybody who was sitting there that day. And I feel like it would have extended out past, you know, that particular day. So it sounds as if, you know, you are you're focused in on some of the culture things, you know, that relate to education outside of just the specifics. And recently I saw somebody say something like, you know, culture eats curriculum for breakfast. And I was just like, what? Yes, it does. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's the culture of the school. And so my question is, and I don't know whether, have you worked in any schools in Africa?
Not yet. So I did do research in Africa, but I haven't. That's even though like that's my next, like that's what I want next. Like I'm like, I've done all of these places. Why am I not on the continent? Like that's a big thing for me.
Not just you, but I think that what you've done so far and your understanding of connecting other places back to here, like you could be, you know, in the middle of something phenomenal in terms of how we connect to the motherland and how we connect to people back in Africa. You know, like learning, how are they learning today? What's right? What's wrong? What needs to be unlearned? What are they wrong about? What are we wrong about? And navigating a conversation that kind of links us together. You know, I just wonder what you think about making that happen, and you know, how can we help, you know, make it work, because that is Black on Black education.
So for me, I would wait till I would actually be there, because, you know, I'm not there. And I feel like there's something to be said about actually being there and connecting with individuals. What I can say that's been interesting is that a lot of Africa has picked up certain things from the Brits. And mind you, I think like I said, there's something I just noted that I think is really great about British education. But one thing I really don't like about it is I also feel like they're very test driven and score driven in a way that I actually think is worse than the US to some degree. So like, I feel like process is a big thing in the US. Like there is a move to like how students learn and that type of thing. Those discussions are happening. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all in the UK, but I feel like that's a lot slower. And so I feel like some of the places where I've talked to and interacted with people, one thing that's interesting is like that holding on to like old British style learning that I still see in a lot of Africa. But this is a outside view, right? And that's why I said I'd rather be there and actually be engaged before I would even start something like that, and see how they would want us to be there. How would they want us to connect and be present? I'm very, you know, like somebody was, I was on with Bobby and did an interview with him. And one of the questions he asked me was about like my dream for the future and my like future school. I said, well, I can't fully say what that is because I don't know where it is, you know, like that should be informed and impacted. Like my dream is not complete solo, right? You know, I can't fully dream in isolation. Like I have certain things that like, I know I wouldn't participate in. Like, you're not going to have me at a school where, you know, I'm running everything as a leader. Like that's not going to happen. You know, that's going to be a collaboration with community, the parents, the educators, and the students. Right. And so I can't tell you exactly what that school will look like because I don't know any of those people on that list. So I feel the same way about like that type of a partnership. Like I would need to be on the ground and connecting with them. And, you know, what you would do in Mali would be very different than what you would do in South Africa. Right. And then what you would do in like rural Ghana would be very different than what you would do in like, you know, urban city Uganda. Like all of those like intricacies matter. So I feel like I'm not even ready to answer that, but it's a commitment I have in my heart. It's something that I know is coming.
We're gonna start to send you some applications. Like we're gonna be on the job boards out there, like, you know, and start sending them your way.
You're not the only one. I have a friend who's in Dakar, and she's like, "So we have a principal position open." First, she's like, "We have a Jedi, like a DEI position opening," and I said, "I don't want to take DEI positions because I want to be the principal on the other end who makes sure that my DEI coordinator actually can get stuff done." Like, I think that's really important to have people who are committed to this work be on the other side, on the side that actually makes it happen. Because when DEI professionals work in silos and isolation, things don't happen. So I feel like having somebody like me who's committed to it, who is like, no, this work has to happen, not just it should, like, no, it has to happen for everybody. I want to stay in my lane. My lane is like this type of leadership, but I want to be that leader that you can partner with, who you can come to and say, Adrienne, y'all messed up. Look at these books that y'all are reading. I go, okay, let's take those down. Let's talk about that, But, and so she's like, I never thought about that. I was like, yeah, that's super important. Like, I'm like, you can find people who are DEI professionals, and I'm not going to lie and act like that's my expertise. It's my love, right? That's my heart. And so she's like, well, we're going to look for a position when she's like, well, what's your timeline? Because I think our principal is going to be leaving in X amount of time and you could apply. And I was like, okay, let me get I want to get my feet. I want to feel really confident in where I am now. So like I work with my special education team and I work with my TAs. Those are two important groups in my school that I feel like often are really overlooked and don't have people who have that knowledge. So working with my SPED team has been amazing, but also working with my TAs and giving them a voice and giving them power and letting them know you're an equal partner in the education that's happening. That was a meeting I was having with them this week. I checked in with them like, how's week 1 going? What is it that you need? And then just yesterday, one came into my office, said, hey, can I talk to you? I was like, yeah. She's like, so my teacher gave me this task. She said, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm wondering if there could be a better use of my time and how we can work with the teachers on that. I said, so I asked her some questions. I said, now I'm asking you questions, not because I'm trying to justify. I said, I want to make sure I understand so that when I go back and I'm talking to your teacher, I have a full understanding of the context and I'm not sticking my foot in my mouth. So yeah, that's the type of work I want to do. And I want to do the same thing, somewhere on the continent.
No, I just appreciate the way that you think so deeply about things, right? And I think that we all have to take a page out of that book, because unfortunately we live in spaces where people will feel so confident in what they know and what they do that they don't recognize that that doesn't mean that what they know and what they do in the context that they work in works for everywhere else. And so I just appreciate this idea that like, I can't answer a question about how I support this group of people without being and talking and communicating with this group of people. And what we do with Black on Black education is so intrinsically believes that, right? If we're talking about, people ask us, okay, when you open a school, like I can't tell you, I have ideas around what I want to do if I opened a school, but I can't tell you at all, because the kids that would come to the school are the kids that need to tell me what they want the school to look like. The kids that are in the community, the parents that are in the community, the businesses that are around the community, all of those people have a stake in what type of school you create, right? And so I'm just so grateful for the way that you answered that question, because I think people need to hear that you are not all knowing. We are not all knowing, and they will never be all knowing, right? We all have to recognize that the lived experience of the people that we serve have to be a cornerstone of any choice that we make, whether it's starting a school, naming a school, developing a curriculum at a school. Anything that we do where we're educating young people, we have to think about how all the stakeholders are a part of that conversation. It doesn't matter who the school leaders are. It doesn't matter who the educators in the room are. If those folks don't have a seat at the table, it's not a school worth developing, because it's not serving the needs of the kids. It's serving the needs of your ego. And those are two things that we really, really have to break down in our education system in the United States. And I would presume in schools all over the world. You came off mute, Dad, so and I was like, "Oh, you going?"
I was thinking the same thing.
I was just going to say facts or bars or like.
And he's like, "Oh, I decided not to do it."
Just I was co-signing what you said.
It was just like that. See, this is the moments where like this virtual podcast be like. But we moving on, people. We moving on, and we keeping this in here because y'all got to see how.
I was wondering. I was like, "Is this?"
No, we keeping this in here. We keeping this in here. But I mean, so everything that we've talked about wants me. I want to go back to something that you said earlier, where you were talking really intrinsically about like your Blackness, being able to be in a Black space and be seen as beautiful because like Black features of women are seen as beautiful because they are Black spaces, right? I definitely had that experience in Jamaica. I know that like every time I go there, I always kind of fall back into a comfort with myself that I don't have when I'm here, right? And so what has it taught you about your own Blackness? And just, again, thinking about the partnership that we have together, teaching for Black lives with Zen Education, like how do you teach for Black lives because of what you have learned about yourself and come into with your own Blackness and your own journey?
So the first thing that I think leaving it, and so now I'm in the Cayman Islands, right? A country that has like tons of Black people. I remember one of the first things I recorded and put on my Instagram being here was I went to the grocery store and I saw Do Grow at the grocery store. This like the bougie grocery store. Like I was like, wait, they sell Do Grow at the grocery store? It is not like it wasn't some Black hair care section. It was the hair care section. And I was just like amazed. So there's something to be said about not having to go and feel like you're some extra, right? Like, no, this is how it is. Like we were at the version of like their wholesale store and they had Shea Moisture products in wholesale. Like
wholesale.
These things are just like amazing that like I'm not like an add-on piece. I'm not some small little section. Like I am part of this. There's something to really be said about that. But when I first went abroad, that I wasn't here. You know, when I first went abroad, I went to the middle. Well, when I first went abroad, I was a kid and I went to Germany with my mom. But as an adult educator, I first went to Qatar. And it's something to be said about just being in places where Black and brown people are the majority and they are running the country and they're doing those things. There's something to be said about it just not being white, right? There's just something about that is pretty amazing. And so it was in Qatar that I started to be like, oh, okay. And I had an epiphany that like, I only saw myself as beautiful with my hair straight. And I was like, well, I have to go through a lot of work to get my hair straight. Why can't I see myself as beautiful with my hair in any kind of way?
Yeah.
So I kind of like committed myself to like not straightening my hair. And it was only supposed to be like a 6-month thing. And that was in 2019. I haven't straightened my hair since. Like this is 2022. Like, but it was doing that. And I met a girl from South Africa who started helping me to take care of my hair, to style my hair, to do all of that. And it took somebody from a country where Blackness is Black, like Blackness is what it was happening to like help me just go through that process. But then also seeing so many different types of Black people also said something to me. I feel like American Blackness is one version of Blackness. And then, Caribbean Blackness is a different, and then, African Blackness. And then there's subsets of all of those, right? Like Northern, like Detroit Blackness ain't the same as New York Blackness, right? Like all of that, but seeing it in like a global context where I would see a Black person open their mouth and I'm like, oh, they're not speaking English. Like there was something about that. Like, I was like, oh, and they weren't speaking like, a mother tongue language either. They were speaking like French and Portuguese. And like, I was like, and mind you, did I know that Black people spoke other languages? Yes. But to like see it as just such a natural thing, there was something about that just helped me to understand the diversity within Blackness that gave me a confidence in my own, right? To see other people just living their own version of Black was super special. So now you take that into a school context. And last year going through Teaching for Black Lives was just such a enlightening thing for me, right? To kind of like really think about how the idea of Blackness plays out everywhere, right? In everything. And has to do with how you show up in gender, how you show up, in education, how you show up when you're thinking about art, how you show up and you think about presenting, and how you show up like in, a country where they're speaking Spanish, and how the Blackness there has really impacted, and also how it's been intentionally wiped out of so many places, right? Like intentionally tried to be written away as if it wasn't how this country has come to be, or how these places and spaces have come to be. And so in terms of like it being in my daily practice, it's what are some of these great things that you see, Blackness like really doing is part of education, whether it's how we storytell, how we engage our elders, how we talk about, our learning. Like if you think about how Black people do it, we fun. Like, I don't care what nobody say, Black people have fun. Like, whether it's the music, whether it's like everything about it, there's just so much soul. And I think for me, Blackness has always been about being your truest you. And what better way to do education than having kids be able to say, I am me. And me is great and amazing for all of these different reasons, you know, and as an educator, be able to say that about yourself. Because I think that's part of what international education did for me, was I can now name to you what makes me awesome, what makes me great, what makes me unique and different from the three of us and from everybody else. Yeah. I don't think I had that same language in 2015 when I was still in the US.
Right. Right. It's I want to bring a couple of things together, like as we start to round out the conversation. You know, earlier there was something that you mentioned about being international, and some places having a different focus on kind of student-centered approaches to education. So, you know, I mean, that's kind of a Black on Black education thing. And just now, you were kind of communicating around students and really being able to step into, you know, their Blackness and you know, and how that connects to education. I just want you to kind of bring those two ideas together a little bit for us.
So I think when you start thinking about identity and not just Blackness, right? I think the beauty of Blackness is the celebration of self, right? And so I also think of like Dr. Enden and how he talks about it. And like, I think this idea of Blackness is the idea that you can be your truth. Like there's so much diversity within Blackness that you don't have to be like what the media has told us is Blackness. One, probably don't really exist in real Blackness first. And then two, does not have to be your story of Blackness. And so I think that when you think about that, that's true for white people. That's true for, you know, Latinx. That's true for all these different people. But I feel like it's something that is central to how Black people identify globally. And so moving that into the education space is like, how do we celebrate what makes you uniquely you? And so I think about like when I work with teachers, and often teachers are always trying to combat what their students are doing. My students talk a lot. I need them to be quiet. No, you need them to talk about what your, you know, like your goals. So I always tell teachers, if you see that your kids do something a lot, stop trying to stop them. Start figuring out how you can develop things that allow them to do that in a space that's now learning, right? Yeah. So if they like to talk, get them to talk about. Sorry.
That whole thing is worth saying again. Please say that again.
Like, get your kids, stop trying to fight your kids. Like, partner with them. They talk, get them to talk. They move, get them to move. Like, stop trying to like put them in this box. Oh, is that a warning? No, sorry. Stop trying to put them in this box. Get them to actually learn in the way that they're going to learn. Because I bet you they're going to learn more. They're going to learn faster, and they're going to be more engaged because you're not fighting who they are as people. And I feel like that's something abroad and in the US I would talk to people about. Is like, whatever you're complaining to me about your kids about, the reason it's a complaint is because you as an educator aren't moving in that direction with them. You have a wave going this way and you trying to swim the opposite way. What? So I think that when I think about like international education, because there's not all that micromanagement, teachers can explore and try those things in a way that feels safe, right? In a way that they're not worried about whether they'll have a job next week because you're not going in there that way. I think there's a real truth in you're not going to fire me because I tried something that didn't work. I think educators have to feel safe to fail. It's something I talk about a lot. Like there has to be a safety in failure. And people are like, well, stop saying fail. No, you fail sometimes. Like that's life. Like you don't win everything. You don't, you know, like that is part of what happens. And that's okay. It's what do you do after? What have I done as a leader to say, that's okay. So what do we do now? And then you do that same thing for the kids because they're going to have stumbling blocks. They're going to have mistakes. How do you make that safe and them to still be able to be so true to who they are in all of that journey?
And again, it's so key that, you know, that this is stuff that the school leader should model to the educators, to the teachers. The teachers should model to the children. The children should be able to come back and model it to their parents. This is the spirit that we need all throughout the community. That yes, it is okay that I got this wrong. I'm just going to get it right next time. Like it's not big red F on the paper, and now I identify as a failure. It's I don't know this now. and you have committed to help me know this, and I care about you as a result of that. And you care. I know you care about me because you are walking me along this journey. Like this isn't, you know, it's not. Here's this test is the destination. No, it's part of that journey. So,
and I would even go further than that, right? Because if we're talking about preparing children for the life that they're going to create for themselves, the only way to do that, no matter what job you choose, right? We think about doctors as like these extremely smart people that just know stuff, right? We think about, like, my friend is in school to be a physician's assistant right now. If she gets a 65 on an exam, it's not, well, you got a 65, but the average is a 90, so you're going to be a PA and you just won't know that stuff. No, she still needs to know the stuff that she didn't know. And so she has to go through a process of remediation and go through every single question she got wrong and understanding why she got them wrong and how she got them wrong and engage in that work with the educator. So it's going even further to say that this is the part that matters the most. You understand that stuff, and that's awesome. And now you can save somebody if that stuff comes up when they're in the doctor's office. But this stuff you still need to know in order for you to do what you need to do to take care of your patients, right? And so this is something that shows up not just in the medical field, but in all fields, that you have to be able to learn how to learn, go through the process of learning so that you're always getting the information that you don't know, because we will never know everything, but we can know a path. We can have a system that works for us and our individual needs, a process that we can go through every time when I need to learn something new to help me get to whatever the next step is. So I just appreciate that piece so much. And I think educators have to step into that, and young people have to recognize that there's nothing wrong with going through the process of being wrong, right? It's staying wrong.
Staying wrong is the problem, but they do recognize it because they play games. And, you know, when they're on level 1, if you want to get to level 2, you know, you are going to fall in the hole. You're going to get killed by the monster. You're going to things are going to happen. And then you're going to learn to slay the monster. You're going to learn to jump over the hole. And then you're going to get to
what he's going to do next time.
And to add to that, one question I like to ask my educators are, like, what's something you're most proud of? Like, what's like something that you look back and you're really proud of? Every time somebody answers that question, there was struggle, there was failure, there was something in it, because at the end, like, to get to that very proud moment, it didn't come easy. Nothing that came easy are the things that you hold on to as like, yes, I did that. It's when you have to go through the falling down, the scrapes, the oops, that was wrong. And then you're on the other end. It's that process that actually gets you there. And I think we forget that. And so asking you to talk about what you're proud of and then how did you get there every single time. I have not once had somebody and it was something they were super proud of and it was just given to them or it came easy. Never.
Facts. This right here, I just, you know, like from 44 minutes on, that's going to be one of those YouTube, like, we're going to put the whole clip there because it's
no. Because if you didn't make it through the whole episode, you at least need to make it through that. So we going to make sure that happens, right? And so, I mean, we could keep going forever and ever and ever, like we could with almost every single episode that we have. Because the wealth of knowledge and information that the guests that we have on this podcast are always just so rich and incredible and make me a better educator and get me excited about, like, ooh, I'm doing my scope and sequence right now. I'm like, ooh, now I need to, and I need to add that, because every time you have these discussions, you know that I have ways that I can make what I'm doing better. So thank you for bringing that in here. I told y'all this was going to be a special one. And so before we hit our last question, where you become the interviewer and we become the interviewees, let us know how people can find your work. I don't know how someone listens to this entire episode and is like, I don't want to hear more from Adrienne. So please let people know how they can find your work, how they can find you, how they can connect and collaborate with you.
So the first way is my website, worldwideeducator.org. Really simple. You see the name at the bottom, just add .org to it. Same name. Take away the space on Instagram. And those are probably the best ways. I'm trying to get better with LinkedIn, which is Adrienne Waller at LinkedIn. So those are ways that I'm growing. But once you connect with me, I give people a phone number and, like, you know, email. You can info at Worldwide Educator. However works for you, I'll connect with you and let's do it.
Let's do it. I love it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now it's your turn. What would you like to ask Eva or I?
So this is funny. I read that and I was like, I asked them a question. This is the hardest question on here. Like, I get to ask something. So it's one that I'm shocked that I haven't asked you yet. It's kind of two parts. So like, I want to hear about just your journey to this father-daughter duo, but then I also just a snippet because I've heard it, but I want to hear it again. And then the other part is, what would it look like if Black on Black was connected with every school? Like, what does that look like? Like, what does that in your heart look like, feel like, sound like? The teacher version of Black on Black really being connected with every school. Like, what transformations? How would education be different because of that partnership?
You want to take the latter and I'll take the former, Eva?
So every time people say that, I have no idea what it means. I'm so honest about that. Like every single time I hear someone say it, I'm like, what is the latter? Like, what is the
last?
I had two parts.
I'm gonna take the second question, and you're gonna take the first question. Let's stop being.
Former is the first, and latter is the late one. There you go.
And now I know. And now I know.
You know, I'm always teaching. Here we go. Let's go.
All right, go ahead on, Dad.
Oh, okay. Former. And I'm sure Eva actually is going to dive into the former as well. But we it's awesome and terrible at the same time. Like, like we talk all the time. It is Eva's my best friend. Like, we are able to navigate the personal and professional as well as I think can be. Sometimes we feel like we need a therapist, and
we're getting a therapist.
Therapy is for everybody, right? Let's name that. Therapy is for everybody. Period. Success, not success. There we go.
Touche. No, but it's when you're connected around a shared passion and purpose, it helps. You know what I mean? Like she never, whatever I do wrong here, she knows I'm not doing it wrong because I somehow don't care about the kids. Like, what I mean? She knows how much I care about this space. She knows how much I care about having impact here, and I know that she's feels the same. So, anything that I feel like she's not, grasping or things like that, I know it's not because she doesn't care. So when you can get past that, you almost can solve, all the other challenges. So, I'll stop there.
Yeah. And I mean, just thinking about like how we even got to that point, it started with, again, you could search it up. Good Morning Britain. Akala was on it. He was talking to Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan was going on and on about Black on Black crime and what is it psychologically about young Black males that they're killing each other and all of these things. And through that entire interview, it was like a 10-15 minute segment. Akala continues. He's a lyricist and a historian out in the UK, and he continues to push against this narrative of Black on Black crime and that it's this very specific issue with these very specific people. And in some ways it is, but it's not for the reasons why many people presume, right? It's not that Black folks are killing each other because we have an insatiable need to kill each other, right? Like, we have deeply rooted, historic driven psychological wounds that have not been healed. And so in him doing that tug of war, he says, I was in a program where Black men would come to the school and teach us history, Black on Black education, if you will. And from that moment, I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. I have no idea. I still have the note in my iPad where I wrote Black on Black education and circled it 50 times and was like, I don't know what this is, but it's something. I called my dad probably directly after that class, if not after my next class, and was like, Black on Black education, I don't know what it's going to be. It might be mentorship. It might be this, like, whatever, we should do it. Let's start it now. And that was where the podcast was born. The conference came soon after that, and just so on and so forth. Anti-racism events, super school events, and all the other things that we've done, they all came from that space. And then to the latter question about like, what would it look like for Black on Black education to be in every school? Whew. It would be iterations of the two things that I am most proud of for Black on Black education. So the Teacher Action Board, where we're working with educators around mindset and understanding the importance of when you work and are intentional about the ways that you support your Black and brown students, every other child in that room is better. They grow. They know how to walk into the world and recognize that they are not the center of the world, that we have to share this space, and that sometimes means we got to get uncomfortable. And I think that us being able to work on that mindset, give teachers real practical skills on how they develop those relationships with young people. I think that there would be a transformation in every single school that we would come into, because the passion that I come with every time I'm working with educators, it is always thinking about how do we do what needs to be done to make sure we are well first, in order to be well enough to show up for our kids. And then on the second side is having iterations of our Student Action Board, which we are officially starting this coming fall. We will be spending an entire year with about 20 students, working and engaging with them around how we develop a research study that pulls out the information around what Black and brown students are feeling in education, particularly Black and brown students that live in low-income areas throughout our country. And we really want to focus on what does it look like? What do they need? What are they struggling with? What's not happening for them? And I think that if more schools had programs like this, which we want to do, so if you're listening to this and you're interested in bringing it to your school, let's have a conversation. But every school having a Student Action Board puts the school in a position to have students in the space that are saying, this is the problem. We don't know this is the problem just because we're saying it here. We know that this is the problem because those students are also saying it over there. And these are the solutions that students are proposing that educators continually don't listen to. And so we're excited for both of those things to continue to grow. And I think that if every single school had a Teacher Action Board and a Student Action Board, where the focus was really how do we support the Black and brown students, the students that learn differently, the students that speak different languages. Like if they were at the center of the focus, again, every single child in that space would be better, because it would be saying that no matter what the way that you show up, you are going to add value here. And if Black and brown people know that, then the white people in the space know that as well. It's not taking away the power of a white person in order to give it to Black and brown people. It's saying that I now have more power and agency within myself because the other people around me have more power and agency. So those are the things that were top of mind for me in that question. I really do think like we have the power, and not we as individuals, like we as a collective have the power to really make some waves in this education system. It really is just about devaluing the folks that don't want to change and amplifying the folks that do, and continuing to build the coalition of educators and young people that are fighting this really, really, really important fight.
And what I'll add to that is just the idea that it's not just about what happens in schools. You know, we're Black on Black education. So this is, you know, what happens in community centers, what happens at church, what happens at kitchen tables. You know, what is the spirit that we're working with to look at every single young person and really understand what that little bit of flame that sits inside of all of them, you know, what that looks like, and how do we fan that flame? How do we turn that flame into an inferno that burns through our community in a way where whatever was in their heart turns into a phenomenal expression that takes our community and significantly improves it. And if we do that with all of our young people, there's just certain things we don't have to worry about anymore. Like, you know, that that's what the future of Black on Black education. It's not our organization. It's a cultural shift for who and how we all operate as Black people, and it's happening. Like there's one with 100% certitude. It is happening right here, right now. We just got to keep it going, and conversations like this help us to do so. So we thank you so much for for engaging in it. If there's anything else you want to leave folks with, now's the time.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute. I was like, I didn't mute the whole episode. I was like, oh, on their question, I'm going to mute, and then didn't know where to find it. The one thing that I would say is that I'll be hosting a series, and depending on when this drops and if I change the dates, but I host every once in a while series on helping you with interviewing and helping you with being able to advocate and share like what you're good at in a 4-part series. The first one's like a free mock interview one where you can just drop in. But then the next 4 that are paid are really focused around how do you interview the interviewer? So just kind of like what you all did, but like that's one of the most important parts of your interview is when they say, do you have any questions for us? Like, yes, it should always be your answer. And then what questions you ask can really dictate whether you end up with that job or not. How do you answer that question that always comes up? Tell us about yourself. You know, like how do you answer those? And then there's a couple of others in the series, but each one is very focused on a different aspect of the interview process. And so walking you through that, and they're pretty reasonably priced. I think they're like $25 each where you can drop in and get that learning. So that series is coming up in the fall. So settling on dates, because being back in school, I was like, oh, wait, life is very different when you're working versus when you're thinking up these things in the summer when you're off. So just need to finalize on some dates, and I'm switching, like they're not all on the same day. So if like one day or time doesn't work for you, you won't miss the whole series. You can join into different ones. So that would be the one thing to share. And if you're thinking about going abroad, contact me. I do 15 minutes free for you, or we can do like deeper dive conversations that are tailored to your needs, your expertise, and what your next steps are.
Absolutely. So educators, tap in. You need to make sure that you are at least following the Worldwide Educators, staying connected with Black on Black education, and just ensuring that the learning that we do during these conversations, the learning that we do outside of these conversations never just sit there. They become action, they become reality, and we get closer and closer to the education system that we want to see. So that was another episode of the Black on Black Education podcast, y'all. We are so grateful for you tuning in once again, and we will see you next time. Bye, y'all.